Well, we're back again in the Narvar Remote Podcast Studio at the NRF. Big show on the floor, a lot of buzz going around, and we have two really excellent guests. Welcome, David. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Sure. Well, let's just jump into it, but to kind of give everybody a little bit of a context of who they're listening to, maybe just ask each of you to take a few seconds to explain a little bit about who you are and what you do. Henry, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Henry Spear. I'm SVP of Digital for North America for JD Sports. I have been in this industry for 20 plus years, started my career in merchandising and sort of worked my way into this digital landscape. And it's been a really fun journey, and I'll stop there and give it to David.
Sure. So I'm David. I'm the Vice President of Customer Strategy and Success at Narvar. For those listeners who maybe aren't familiar, Narvar is the leading post-purchase provider in retail, working with over 1,500 retailers. And at my role, I've been at Narvar for the last 8 years. I often like to say I grew up in retail at Narvar, working really alongside all of our customers that we work with, including teams like Henry's team at JD. Really thinking through what does Narvar see as the industry landscape? What do we hear from our customers as the industry landscape? What do we kind of see outwardly of the consumer landscape, and bring all those three things together and work with our retailers and partners to really build out the best experiences they can.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure many people will be familiar with JD, but perhaps not all. So just maybe a quick overview of JD Sports.
Yeah, JD Sports is a sports fashion retailer based out of the UK. So we have a long heritage and history in UK and EMEA. More recently, entered into the North American market through the acquisition of Finish Line, which a lot of people will recognize, especially from those mall-based shoppers ages ago. And, we really sit at this intersection of sports and fashion, and that's our big differentiator. When you think about the traditional model of going into a store and buying sneakers off of a wall, yes, we still do that, but we also bring a lot more from a merchandising, outfitting, and experience perspective. We're also a massively global company. We operate in over 30 countries. We have over 3,000 stores, including about 600 here in North America. So we are continuing on this journey of really bringing JD Sports to market here in the U.S. especially, and creating that unique customer experience that separates us from the other competitors in our space right now.
Let's unpack your operating experience a little bit. So in the context of your colleagues and other retailers, you have a very complex, you are certainly a scale, you're global, that adds complexity. But what do you think, as an operator today and retailers going into 26, they might underestimate in terms of complexity, and whether it's in the environment or the operating environment or the tool set?
Yeah, I think what ends up happening with our space is consumer demands change constantly, and that's both demand for products, but that's also demands on how they discover and experience those products. We'll hear a lot of talk about
customer journey, really,
exactly.
Right?
We'll hear a lot about AI. Obviously
what?
at NRF.
Wait.
Yeah, can you believe?
What is this AI you speak of?
And
Does
I
that
think
stand for something?
exactly. And I think the challenge there is how broad that definition is and what that actually means to a consumer. And I think where some retailers are struggling is figuring out how is that customer actually shopping, how is that customer experiencing our brand, and then how do they actually want to be serviced ultimately. And I think looking at the journey not just from the first footstep into the door through that transaction or that first visit to a website through the post-purchase journey is different now, because the customer is thinking, shopping, exploring, and discovering in ways that they never have before. And so that is something that is extremely challenging right now, because I have to not only be aware of what that on-site experience is like or that post-purchase experience is like, I have to think about how that customer is actually experiencing and interacting with our brand or the products that we sell at all these various touch points. And overseeing digital, it's the site experience, but it's also the marketing, and then it's also in some ways like the psyche of where that consumer is thinking about our brand and the products that we sell.
I was drawn to Narvar because I love talking about returns, because I think it's such a fundamental element of the business model, and it's an opportunity for success. How do you think about the changing role in the customer journey, and what do you guys do to add perspective and think about it?
I feel really lucky to work at Narvar, because I think Narvar was really the first company in the space almost 15 years ago, really thinking about how customer experience, particularly in post-purchase, can be a differentiator. So when we say post-purchase, we think about everything that happens right about at the buy button and everything else after that. So as the customer is waiting for their shipment, after it's been delivered, if there's any sort of follow-up action like a return that's needed, how do you really think about that as a connected part of the customer journey? Where we are now, and I think Henry touched on this a little bit, is how he thinks about it in his role, is that truly consumers, I think, are savvier than ever. I often say that when I first started at Narvar, I thought about post-purchase as a differentiated luxe experience. I think where we are today is that post-purchase experience is really table stakes in the overarching customer journey.
It's interesting.
And all aspects of customer or post-purchase, consumers expect and have a higher level of what good is in that experience. You know, they now expect to be communicated with. They now expect to have multiple channels to go through for support if they need anything. And then in returns, I absolutely agree. That is such a critical moment and touch point in the customer journey as you think about how do you get that customer back to you. I think two stories that I've said a lot at this show. One, I was wearing a really fabulous shirt yesterday, and a lot of people.
You are today,
Well,
by
thank
the way.
you.
To be
Thank
fair,
Well,
you know,
to be
it's
fair.
not
And
bad.
a lot of people ask me,
I love that.
where did you get that shirt? I'm like, the internet. But I actually,
Have you heard of it?
yeah. But I actually got it on like an Instagram ad, and I'm pretty wary of it. Got attracted to it, and the first thing I did before I made a purchase decision is I looked at the return policy to see, okay, if I buy this kind of weird targeted thing on Instagram, how hard is it going to be for me to have some sort of follow-up action like
How locked
exchange?
in am I on this purchase?
Or like, am I going to have to
Takes-
call
yeah.
or write an email
Big hassle.
or pay money, which
Yeah.
sometimes is okay.
Yeah.
And again, like, especially with the ubiquitous of choice that consumers have now in the market, and I think there's a lot of this on the acquisition side, consumers are willing to brand switch faster and quicker more than ever if something doesn't go to their delight. And returns are often seen as a frictionless experience, so providing that connected customer experience, and especially in any sort of follow-up action needed, is actually really, really pivotal to that next purchase with a brand.
So Henry, we already touched the AI third rail here. I don't know if it's a third rail or not, but people that have been at the show, anybody paying attention to the show, or frankly probably reading anything in retail today, we keep hearing about agentic commerce. Tell us a little bit about how you're looking at that, and I guess, you know, we're interested in specifically what you're doing, but also maybe for our audience, like, how do you separate the signal from the noise? How do you know what's just experimentation versus the things that are maybe really ready to commit to more seriously?
Yeah, I'm waiting for like a banner to drop because you said agentic commerce. Right? It's like you
Ding, ding, ding,
hit the
ding.
buzzword.
I think of that confetti that
Yeah,
goes up
exactly.
in there.
So I think where there is confusion right now is the definition of agentic, and the way that I like to think about it is there is the discovery component of agentic commerce, right? Like, and this is what you hear a lot about when you think about GEO or AEO and getting prepared to actually show up in the various LLMs, right? So I'm looking for a specific pair of sneakers for a specific event, and I'm a size 10, and I want them to be black and white, right? There's that component, which is a huge positioning play for retailers right now, right? How do you make sure that you are actually present and showing up in these LLMs in a way that you want to be represented? Because the flip side of that is you can show up in a way that isn't favorable to your brand, right? So you want to show up and make sure that you're talking about not only the products that maybe you have available to sell, but also the features, benefits, and all the, you know, unique selling points that you would have for those various products. And if you're really good, you're also communicating to the customer why you should buy from me versus someone else, right? So there's this entire discovery component, which I think is where people have really started to dip their toe in the water. But then the actual like dream state is this entire agentic run end-to-end experience from both discovery all the way through purchase and ultimately post-purchase, right? So I'd be remiss in a Narvar booth to not mention post-purchase. And so when you think about that end-to-end experience, that is, I think, the buzziest and the most interesting piece, and it's something that you'll see a lot of announcements that have happened over the past few
I was
days,
gonna say,
including JD Sports.
Right, a quick follow-up. Like, I've seen some big announcements about everybody coming together, and it feels like, is everybody just going to wind up using the same platforms, and is that just going to, everybody's going to see the same results, or can you gain advantage from the deals that you make with them platforms when they're doing deals with everybody else? How do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, so we're on Commerce Tools from an e-com platform perspective, and what we're doing with Commerce Tools is working with them to be effectively LLM agnostic. I think we've seen some really unique partnerships and announcements come out that are very specific to one LLM, and from my perspective, if we're talking about you want to be present with the consumer wherever they want to discover you, which I mentioned earlier, I don't want to be specific to one LLM as it exists right now. I want to be available wherever that customer is going through their discovery
Formally
journey.
or informally, right? Because
Exactly.
it feels like up until now, retailers been trying to develop authority in whatever ways they can informally, but now they're cutting formal deals with the different LLMs.
Correct.
Not just one, though. There's multiple partnerships.
Exactly.
Do you think you might go that way?
I see it as it's too early. When I see these announcements that are exclusive deals, my concern is we've all lived in an age where there was a preferred vendor or provider for something that then lost favor with the consumer.
I ran my site on Netscape, and that didn't work out all that well, right?
Exactly, and if you think about the proliferation of web providers, email providers, various SaaS vendors that we've all probably worked with at different points that may not exist anymore, I think I get nervous to go all in on one because the consumer is still really figuring out how they want to experience this. And I think about agentic commerce as how do we make sure that we are present in both discovery and then refine the experience to make sure that when they are actually transacting with that agent, that it's a great experience. Because right now, it feels very early to commit. Exactly.
Could be.
And it could also be terrible. And then as a rapidly growing brand, especially in the North American market, GD Sports, I want to make sure that your first interaction with us is the best possible interaction. And I have yet to see a true agentic experience that feels like it is going to be the best representation of my brand, and it's still really important for me as a retailer to own that branded experience.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll pass the mic to Steve. Does it feel like, for either of you, that consumers now are giving a little permission for AI to be wrong, that they understand that it's not perfect, that there's a bit of forgiveness, in other words? Do you get that sense, Henry? David?
Well, I think many consumers maybe don't know that AI is sometimes wrong, and I think if I'm stepping into Henry's shoes and even thinking about what Narvar is setting out to do in the agentic space, I think that's the really careful part about implementing true consumer-facing tech right now, because I think we know that there is still some hallucinations. I think on the Narvar side, what we're really focused on, starting with the introduction of Navi, is thinking through how do we harness our data and start out with use cases that we're already solving today in kind of more of a configuration workflow and bringing those into the agentic space so that we can kind of start with the industry in the things that we know today to be true and to own. I'm curious your perspective on that as well, especially as a brand.
Yeah, we are leveraging AI and agents to power various things in our organization. And so it is figuring out what is the tolerance level for those mistakes and errors that I think is really important. And this is where, when you think about being present in the various models, you do want to make sure that you are setting yourself up for a best-in-class experience for the consumer to try to mitigate hallucinations, wrong facts, anything like that. So for me, I think some consumers understand there's still mistakes, but I'm not 100% sure on what the tolerance level is.
The window's closing.
Mistakes. Yeah.
Window's closing.
Yeah. So maybe pull back a little bit. I'm curious, particularly if you're here at the NRF big show, so many different tech providers working on so many different issues. And even if we just think about the customer journey, not some of the other fulfillment, whatever might be going on here, how do you prioritize what to work on? One of the models I've used with some of my clients is to think about the customer journey and try to find those pain points, friction points, but also places to do what I really call amplify the wow, do something remarkable that can really differentiate your brand. But even, with that kind of glib, high-level thing, it's still not so easy to do. But I'm curious, just sort of in general, how you approach where to put your attention. But even then, you probably have way more things to focus on than you possibly can. So how do you identify that? How do you try to value the investment that goes into them? And then, David, I'll come back to you too, because you see this across a whole spectrum of clients.
Yeah, and David's competing with various tech roadmaps, right, to get on there and be prioritized. And so I look at it two ways. I think the point that you brought up is probably the first one is, what are the biggest customer pain points or friction points that we want to address? And then there's also this idea around what are the opportunities to create moments that are unique and different for us. we're a multi-brand retailer, and so ultimately our products are available at other retailers. And so so for me, it's an experience, and how do you create a different experience? And so when we are evaluating products, it's not just purely revenue or that customer pain point. It's also how do we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? And so things like agentic commerce is an opportunity for differentiation, and not just being a first mover or somebody that's participating in that space, but how do we actually be the best represented on in the various models and on the various LLMs in a way that the customer is going to positively respond to.
Yeah. David, how about you? What are you seeing with other clients?
Yeah, I mean,
and I guess sorry to interrupt, but also I guess another thing is there any kind of categories of retailers where you see meaningfully different approaches?
Well, I think the first thing, and we hear this a lot, I'm sure other guests have said that, I think what's really exciting about being at NRF this year, last year everyone was clearly just like learning. And I think this year is the first time we've been like at the show floor, and the conversations we've had this week have been like really detailed, in-depth discussions with tech and digital and e-com leaders about what are your capabilities and how do we start to think about road mapping, which I think is a really exciting signal in the industry that we've gone from people, trying to just understand the landscape to really be interested in thinking through how do they start to harness the power of agentic commerce and AI to actually drive new experiences. I think from the road mapping, I think every retailer is on their different journey. Certainly, one of the two things I think will happen. One, we work with a couple or many retailers that are pretty far along already on their thinking of how to use automation and self-service to reduce things in the post-purchase space. Today, that's largely, I would say, within the customer support space, automating Wizmo calls, automating claims, automating returns. So those retailers who already have been on that journey in their maybe configurable chatbots are really, really primed to start accelerating that experience already. I think the other exciting thing is we're starting to see retailers maybe like skip level, like maybe didn't have a bot at all, and they're just gonna kind of leapfrog right into the agentic space and do it potentially quicker and more nimbly than those retailers who are gonna have to maybe unpack the existing and figure out what worked and didn't work, and really go right into that space of like, okay, we know we're behind, and these are the bets we wanna make. We haven't invested in something like a chatbot. How do we really think about all of the comprehensive solutions that an automated chatbot through agent-to-agent experience could do? And then how do we start to tap the different either internal data sources or partners like Narvar to really build out those experiences at scale and at speed?
Right. Because it can be, to continue the metaphor, a very crowded road in the roadmap, right? There's a lot of things to do. Well, listen, we're coming up on our time. So I wanted to just, the last question, tap into some of your advice and wisdom. We've circled around what's going to differentiate probably winning retailers from retailers to be less successful in this space. But as you think about advice to your fellow retailers, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things they just absolutely need to get right in 2026? And that's a question for both of you. So, Henry, start us off.
Yeah, I mean, I think continuing to be curious about all of the things that are out there. The advantage of coming to something like NRF is there is a lot of noise, but you also get a lot of perspective, and you start to hear about what's actually working for people, because I think there's a lot of hypotheses right now about what's going to be the best in the next few years as potentially customers change their shopping behavior. And so I think continuing to be curious and listening and learning, and also exploring yourself with agentic commerce and AI. I think
like
it's
personally, like in your daily life.
Exactly. And so, and whether that's true use cases of actually completing a transaction with an agent and understanding what that experience is like as a consumer. But in addition, just understanding how the various models work and how you might be interacting with it for things maybe not directly related to shopping, right? It might be about cooking or something else, just to understand how that consumer behavior is working, because I think it would be remiss to make broad assumptions about how people are actually interacting with these models.
Steve, have you done a transaction through AI yet? I haven't.
I've done exploration, but I haven't completed a transaction.
It's great advice.
And what's stopping you, right? It's a seamless experience, or at least it should be as it exists today, right? So, and then I would just say the continued exploration of the consumer journey. We talked a little bit about it, but I think the journey I said it at the beginning, it's longer and broader than I think it ever has been. And so figuring out ways to be present amongst the journey, not just before purchase and exploration, but also post is really important, because that's a consumer expectation now.
David, what about you? You talk to a lot of people, you've been talking to a lot of people at this show, but let's boil it all down, because we're in an elevator.
No pressure.
We're in an elevator. You got to cut. Look, you got to do these things.
Yeah, well, I think I'm actually going to take a nice segue from Henry from there. While most retailers today are thinking about post-purchase as a critical point in the customer journey, many retailers still have like acquisition and purchase over here and post-purchase here, and haven't fully unified that customer journey. And I think that's going to be a really important first step to actually thinking, how do you use AI and agentic commerce to accelerate it? If it's already bifurcated, you're going to have a bifurcated experience.
And that might be in corporate structure as well, right?
Absolutely.
Like who owns
the
perennial question, who owns the customer, but who owns that experience? That needs to connect more, integrate.
100%. I've had that same conversation with probably 4 different retailers today who have been like, why do these 2 teams
Because
own
typically
these
it's
2 different
operations
things?
owns returns or someone, or it's not always
That actually can sit lots of places too.
Right.
So good point. I think the next one, which is kind of tied together, is there's so much dollar and attention being spent on acquisition. As all of us know, the cost of acquisition is so much higher. How do you start to think about the same acquisition strategies in post-purchase, and specifically around personalization? Obviously, I know that's a huge buzzword, but it's true. The power of AI and the power of harnessing data can really allow you to be hyper-personalized, both in the acquisition and search space, but also in the post-purchase space as well. So how do you start to think through building out programs and experiences and journeys that are using the same personalization strategies in the purchase cycle, and think about how do you apply them into returns?
So say more about that. Is that like, I see you've returned these 3 things. Clearly we're not getting it right with you. Can we help? Here's what we'd suggest. Is that integration you're talking about?
That's a great one. I think we also think through things of not all customers are created equal, and not all returns are created equal as well. So how do you start to think through treating your best customers differently, making sure you understand who their customers are, using solutions like Narvar's Iris Intelligence to understand Henry maybe has never shopped at JD before, but he's a great customer. For this return, to make sure he comes back and purchases for you again, maybe you want to make sure it's as easy as possible, give him his refund faster. Conversely, if Henry's brother is maybe not a great customer, maybe you want to use intelligence to create some friction in that experience. Maybe send him to a store where he might be able to kind of be resold, or kind of think at a cost, things of that nature. So really thinking to that hyper-personalization in the post-purchase experience, knowing how critical it is, and knowing how treating either your first-time customer or a really, really loyal customer well in that returns experience is really going to accelerate that repurchase. And so I think that then all gets retailers ready to start thinking, then how do you really take the power of agentic commerce with that unified experience and that personalized strategy to really do something cool on the different platforms wherever the agents may live.
Yeah, before we wrap, I really like, and you didn't say this exactly, but so correct me if I'm not stating it right, but I think there's such a mentality of returns being a cost center as opposed to a loyalty builder, ROI, engagement builder. Obviously, there are costs associated with it, but thinking about that more intelligently, strategically, I think makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think if you think about the quickest way to lose a customer is to make a return experience really challenging, right? If you've ever had a bad return experience, and I'm sure we all have, you probably don't want to go back to that retailer. So I think there's as you think about the opportunity for win backs, et cetera, it is an interesting space to capitalize on, making it positive.
I'd love to tell a story. I know I'm running out of time, because I think it's an illumination of that exact thing. I spend a lot of time at conferences, as most of us do, and I was recently at a conference last year talking to a woman over a cocktail. She's like, Narvar, what does Narvar do? I explained it, and she's like, returns. And I saw like the wheels turning in her head, and she's thinking, and she's like, returns are important. And I was like, tell me more.
Say more?
Yes. And she was like, recently I bought a chandelier, and I was really excited, and I spent a lot of time online trying to go to the discovery process and the purchase process, and they delivered it, and it was white glove, and it came, and I opened it, and I just didn't like it. And the first thing that went through my head was fear. I have this large item, it's freight. How in the world am I going to return this? Like, this is going to be a nightmare, like, dread in her face. And so she said, so then I like went online and I figured out, I called them and they sent a scheduled delivery to her, white glove pickup the next day, took it out of her house. She was so relieved. And she told me, so the next thing I did is I sat on my couch and I was like, you know what, though? I still need a chandelier. And the first thing she did is open that same retailer's website and started to shop again because of how much peace of mind and trust they built in that experience. She's still a consumer. She still wants something, and she's got to go back and buy
and hopefully
again.
the next chandelier as well, because that bonding thing, right?
Though most people don't buy a ton of chandeliers.
Well,
I'm saying, but
not
Depends how big your house is.
Not to be judgy here. Not to be judgy
I guess people have learned about the size of my house. Smallish.
Well, gentlemen, it's been such a treat chitting and chatting with you. Like I said, I love talking about returns, and we really appreciate you taking the time at a busy show to spend some time with Steve and I here in the Narvar Podcasting Studio, which has been just a wonderful addition, and it's been a wonderful resource for us being here at this intersection. People love it, so thank you to Narvar particularly, and Henry, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.